Hello, everybody. This is Brian from Necronomicast. Thank you for tuning in for this exciting 14th season of the show. Could not do it without you. Now, if you're ever wondering if there was kind of a fun and inexpensive way that you could support the production of this show, I've got news for you. You can go to buymeacoffee.com/Necronomicast. Every time I have an author, a documentary filmmaker, or a creative person on this show to talk about their project, you know I've supported their project. So if you go to buymeacoffee.com/Necronomicast, that will enable me to continue to do the work that I do here on the show. So thank you so very much from the bottom of my heart for all the support and encouragement you've given me over the years. And you know what? If you buy me a cup of coffee at the website, I would be more than happy to deliver a personalized message to you on the show. 2 or more cups of coffee? I'm going to send you something in the mail. buymeacoffee.com/Necronomicast. And now, on with the show. From Omaha, Nebraska, the capital city of the historic haunted heartland, my name is Brian Corey, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all, young and old, to this special episode of the world-famous Necronomicast. Episode 309 is here, my friends, and with it, a cursed collection of haunted dolls featuring author Fiona Dodwell. Robert, Annabelle, Peggy, the very names of these dolls could strike fear into your heart. Fiona, who has been gripped by the idea of spirit-possessed dolls for years, dives into real-world and fictional examples of toys gone bad, playthings meant to comfort children, but instead make life a living hell. So friends, call the neighbors, wake the kids. This is a special episode you're not going to want to miss as I welcome to the program Fiona Dodwell, a cursed collection of haunted dolls right here for your listening pleasure on the Necronomicast. And now calling in on the Necronomicast Newsmaker hotline, I have on the program the author of a cursed collection of haunted dolls, Fiona Dodwell. Fiona, we've talked a little bit before we started rolling tape. It's great to have you on the program. Welcome.
Thank you, Brian. It's great to be on the show, and I've been really looking forward to talking about this subject with you. So it's great to be here.
I'm so excited. I'm glad that we got the time zone thing kind of figured out. I'm in Omaha, Nebraska, the central portion of the United States, and you're calling from England. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm here based in England. I live near the coast, so I have all the beautiful views of the sea and everything. So I'm kind of very far away from you, but it's great to connect with you.
I know. I love technology and the way that we're able to like communicate and connect our ideas together. It's great. And I know, just from chatting with you and everything, like you are familiar with my friend of the program, a great paranormal writer, the great Richard Estep.
Yes, I am. I love Richard and his work. He's released some amazing books, and his kind of wonderful way with words and his research, the locations he's visited, everything really. He's done such a wonderful job in the field of the paranormal. So I've been following his career for a long time, and now it's quite exciting because we're both published with the same publisher, Llewellyn. So we're kind of like colleagues now, which is great. Yeah,
I'm super excited for you and your new book coming out, like you said, from Llewellyn Press. They are friends of the program. Shout out to Kat over there that always sends me just the best guests. I really enjoyed reading through your book. I have a copy of it. I have a copy of it right here. We're going to dive into it. But when I start researching people for the show and I get interested in a topic and welcoming somebody on the show, I read up on them to make sure that we can have a good conversation. And being a music buff, a music major myself, I saw that you did an incredible interview and you've worked with Morrissey from the Smiths. My gosh.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan personally of Morrissey. Like many years of my life, kind of grew up listening to him and just absolutely loving his lyrics and his style. And I wrote a few articles about him several years ago. And in 2018, one member of his team reached out and they actually asked me to write the liner notes to his greatest hits album. And then following on from that, it's kind of culminated in me interviewing him. So I've interviewed him, I think, 3 or 4 times now. One time was in London before a show, before he was doing a gig. I saw him before the show and we sat in the seats of this beautiful theatre, the London Palladium, and I interviewed him and that was filmed and that's actually on YouTube. So people can watch that and our conversation that I had with him. And it was a wonderful experience. You know, he's very articulate, very intelligent, wonderful sense of humour. So it was a great experience.
I love the fact that you have this musical background or this love of music that translated into a great opportunity for you to write along with Morrissey. That's pretty cool. I was a music major in college, like I said, and I love looking for connections in things. So that's neat that you've made a connection like with your writing and then the paranormal and then also incorporating music. I gave an online lecture about the connectiveness of human spirit, like perhaps using music in a paranormal investigation. So I think we got a lot in common for this conversation.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Absolutely.
Well, listen, you're writing for Morrissey, liner notes, under contract for Llewellyn. It's because you're a great writer. All these things are happening for you. And you've got this book, A Cursed Collection of Haunted Dolls, that just came out in September in the United States. Is it out there in England? Is it there available?
The date's slightly different over here. So it will be available very soon. The Kindle version, actually, the ebook version's available now in England, but the paperback's just a couple of weeks behind. But yeah, it's been out in America since early September. So I've had a good response so far, which has been encouraging.
What's neat about the book, it's a lot of fun because, first of all, haunted dolls, yikes. I get that reaction a lot when I tell people I'm going to have somebody on the show that's like an expert in writing a book about haunted dolls. Almost universally, people are like, yeah, I don't know about that, Brian. I don't know about that. But you go from cases of real life haunted dolls to how they were used as in literature, and then also pop culture and movies. So it's like it's not just a creepy book or just facts, like fixating on one aspect of the haunted doll phenomenon, but like you give a nice history and a good course of the sense of historical importance in the paranormal world and in pop culture about these haunted dolls. It's really great.
It was fun to write, actually. And I had quite a few strange reactions myself when I first told people what I was going to be writing about and researching. You mentioned the term haunted dolls, and you do get a reaction from people. And it's funny because it always made me think, really. I used to look at the paranormal and see how much more accepted it was to believe in a haunted house, a haunted room, a haunted hotel. There's so much more of an acceptance there. But I used to think, well, if a room that's just bricks, just material can be haunted or have some kind of energy attached, then is it that much of a stretch that an object, for whatever reason, could also have energy attached? And that's really what drove me to want to write the book, really, is just to explore all the many cases that we have read about and heard about throughout history of haunted dolls, and to speak to people who have owned haunted dolls themselves and just really kind of take a deep dive into the subject, interviewed many people. And then I added a part to the book, as you mentioned, where I wanted to look at the influence of haunted dolls in films and literature. So it is a kind of a full-on guide, really, to the whole subject. And it was a lot of fun to put together. And I felt like I managed to put like a good argument forward to validate the idea that this is a real experience to many people.
Oh, yes. And you touched on famous cases like the Annabelle doll and Robert the doll. Mm-hmm. And then like one that I never heard of before, but I even did a deep dive after reading your book on Okiku. Is that how you say it? From Japan. Yes. From Japan. What a crazy, like a lot of people are familiar with Annabelle. A lot of people are familiar with Robert the doll, but this Okiku from Japan. Interesting. Can you tell us a little bit about that one? Like like I was just creeped out by like the hair, like on the doll, like growing on its own. Bizarre.
Yeah, it is a bizarre case, actually. And in a way, the story of Okiku reminded me of some of the miracle statues you hear of when they talk about crying tears and things materializing around statues. It reminded me of that. But yeah, this case of Okiku, basically, to kind of sum it up for you, there was a family and their young daughter became quite ill. And it came to the point really where treatment wasn't working and she sadly passed away. Now, this little girl had a favorite doll, as many girls do. You know, like she loved this doll, she nurtured it, she had it for years, and it was always with her. So, of course, when the parents sadly lost their daughter, they decided to keep this doll in memory of her, and they put it on display with other things like, you know, photos, like a kind of memoriam sort of thing. And then after a while, they noticed this really strange phenomena where it looked like the hair on this doll was growing. And at first they kind of questioned them, you know, you question yourself as you would, you know, they were saying, well, maybe we're imagining things, you know, you kind of like put a big question mark over it really. But then over time it became more apparent. And I think it unnerved the parents because they weren't quite sure what was going on or how that could be explained. And in the end, they donated the doll because they became uncomfortable with this. They donated the doll to a monastery, I think it was, or like a monk's temple. And they ended up saying that they would keep the doll themselves and protect it. And they kept the doll themselves in a certain area of this place where they resided. And they actually confirmed themselves that they were noticing there was little stints of this doll's hair growing, and they kind of attributed it to say, you know, was there some kind of energy left from the girl? Was it some kind of little sign spiritually that, you know, she was still there and around with her favorite doll? Or was there another explanation? You know, it's not something we can ever fully answer, but it was certainly a bizarre enough case where I thought, yeah, I've got to mention that one in the book, you know, because not a lot of people have heard of that one.
There are things that just popped into my head. You were talking about dolls and then like even like statues and whatnot. I was just thinking of like different like religious miracles or things that are regarded as miracles, like weeping dolls, or statues, or weeping or bleeding, like religious effigies, things like that. Would you consider those kind of part of like the haunted quote unquote doll phenomena?
It's something that I looked at as part of the process of writing the book because it was just coming up with cases that reminded me of that whole phenomenon. So it's not something that I delved into in the book, but it's certainly something I've kind of looked into and read about and thought that it was interesting in its own way. But then it's hard to kind of really get to the bottom of those cases, isn't it? That, you know, there doesn't seem to be an answer, much like with the paranormal, I suppose. It's hard to get to the root cause, you know.
Yeah, I just thought it was pretty interesting, maybe making a connection between there, because you were talking, you know, like if houses can be haunted and things can be haunted. And I know, like later on, before I let you go, I know you're working on another project where you're going to be writing a book about just haunted objects. So maybe that would be something that's included in there. But like you had this story in here and I forgot about this one. I've heard about this in the past and I've read about it. And then probably because it's so creepy, it left my imagination. It left my my brain. But the story of the corpse bride, the mannequin in Mexico, which, yeah, nightmare fuel right there.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is a really unusual, it's just as bizarre actually as Okiku's case. So for those who aren't familiar, there is a bridal store basically, and the story surrounding this location is that there are mannequins, as there are in most stores, on display, kind of wearing dresses to kind of advertise products and everything. But there's one particular mannequin there that has been in the same position for years, kept as kind of like a central part of the store, wearing the same dress, beautiful gown and bridal dress. But the strange thing about this mannequin is that, unlike all the others that look distinctly plastic, that don't look lifelike, this particular one really looks quite detailed and quite strange, to the point where people actually think it looks too lifelike. It's almost like, if you actually look it up online, some photos there showing details of the hand and even the fingernails and the skin on the face, it looks very, very much like, it's not a stretch to consider that it could be true, this whole story, that this is a real person that actually passed away in a tragic circumstance. And the father who owned the bridal store, the legend goes and the story says that he kept her, he preserved her, and he wanted her there. And that's really fascinated me. This whole idea that people are walking around a shop or walking along the high street, and for all they know, they could just be mere feet away from this, poor deceased woman. But yeah, if your listeners, are interested in that story, that there are some photographs that will make you think actually it could very well be true, because it's unusually lifelike.
Don't do a Google search on her before you go to bed. That's my advice.
No, don't. It is nightmare fuel, like you said. It's creepy stuff, definitely.
It is. And now I'm looking at your Zoom feed behind you. You've got an assortment of dolls behind you. And reading your book, I know that you have collected some. Sometimes you have more in your collection than other times. What does your family or friends think? Like when you invite them over for a cup of tea or for an afternoon of relaxation, when you invite somebody over to your house to come over, do you have to take them to a separate spot of the house that doesn't have any dolls, or what's going on behind you there?
I have experienced it in the past. A couple of visitors that have walked in, looked really unnerved, and then looked like they wanted to turn around and walk straight back out, to be honest. But
right.
I have been asked to turn some around, or could I move this or that one to another room? That has happened before. There's one particular friend who visits sometimes, and he'll always sit in one end of the sofa, because the other end of the sofa is a table, a small little table where I have a large clown. And this clown that I have is actually haunted. And this guest that I have over quite a lot shuffles always to the further side of the room that he can get. He's not keen on it at all. But mostly, like in terms of family, they think I'm a bit strange. They think that I have this really bizarre interest. My husband is a skeptic, but he's very supportive of it. Although it's interesting, most of the time he'll just say, he'll roll his eyes and say, oh, that's Fiona. I don't really mind what I get into or what dolls I buy, but I had my eye on an interesting doll recently, and I think I've finally found my husband's boundary, because he took one look at this photo and was like, yeah, that's not coming in the house.
Can you describe it?
Oh, it's very, very unusual. It's got a nickname called Bobby Boots, and it looks like a wooden carving of a face with bright red eyes, large cheeks, very chiseled features, long black hair, wearing a suit and a long pair of leather boots. And it's the most unusual, which is what draws me to it. What seems to put most people off, for me, it's the opposite. If I see a doll that looks quirky or unique or different, that gets me going. I think, oh yeah, I'd love that. But this one, I think my husband, I finally found that place where it's like, yeah, enough's enough with that one, So I don't think I'll be owning this one.
What is the country, or what's the origin of Bobby Boots?
There is a lady. To be honest, this is only an item I've seen a few hours ago on the internet, and there's a lady that she collects kind of curious items herself. And she's in the past sold all sorts of unusual stuff, even a death mask, I think, tribal masks and things like that. She's had some really, from what I gather anyway, like I said, I'm new to this particular person, and but she just had some interesting pieces. And then I saw Bobby Boots, and he's supposed to have some kind of energy attached. But even outside of that, if there wasn't even truth to the whole thing of an energy being attached, because I never take that for granted unless I experience it myself. Even as a collector's piece, he's just so quirky and different. But at the same time, I've shown a couple of friends a photo of him, and they've said he does look like he'll come up in the night and murder you. So maybe I have lost the plot at last, and I've lost perspective. I don't know.
What's funny about dolls, my oldest child, my daughter, is just about 20. So 20 years ago or so, my mom purchased from a family friend. She was a crafts woman. She made all kinds of crafts and stuff. She made for my mom to give to my daughter 2 dolls, a Raggedy Ann and a Raggedy Andy. Pretty traditional looking by all accounts. So they were handmade by this lady, Teresa. My mom bought them from Teresa, gave them to my daughter. And this was, 20 years ago, this was before the Annabelle movie. Annabelle was popularized through Ed and Lorraine Warren. So, there was that information out there. But, we didn't know I didn't think anything at all about Annabelle 20 some odd years ago or 20 years ago. I didn't
Yeah.
really put it together that it looked like Raggedy Ann. My daughter, being 1 year old, didn't. My mom didn't have any knowledge of that. But boy, you bring something like that into the house, and it's just, it's unnerving, kind of creepy before it was like a cultural thing of being creepy in terms of like that particular doll at that time. It's very strange.
Mhm.
But what is it about dolls that give people sometimes that creep factor? And then, but like, little kids love them, like, some ladies that grow up with them and embrace them and take care of them, when they're younger, they love them. But some people, it's just instantly odd or instantly unnerving. What is it about dolls?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the fascinating things, is that even if you were to separate this whole idea of haunted dolls or some kind of energy or possessed dolls, there's just the psychology behind it, where they're creeped out already, even before you add anything else into the mix. And I do think a large part of that is the fact that, obviously in popular culture, we've built that up, like the Hollywood influence of Child's Play and Dolly Dearest and, the Boy, and all sorts of films have kind of seeped into our consciousness. So I know that's a part of it, I think. But also, I think that people find it unnerving seeing these very lifelike figures. It's not just like a toy, like a car or something. We see it as distinctly human. So, depending on what kind of doll, but I'm sure you know what I mean when you see some dolls and you'll look at them and you'll think, wow, it really feels like it's lifelike, or it really feels like their eyes are looking at you, or really expressive. And I think there's just something there. There's something about that kind of reflection of a human being, that human vessel that does something to us, in our minds psychologically. And it's a funny one though, because like you say, you see dolls in all houses. Our children have them, grandchildren. Some of us have had it as children and still continue to keep our favorite dolls now. We have adults that collect porcelain dolls. That's the thing. They're just so common and they're so everywhere that perhaps that's even what frightens people, is that we have these innocent looking little toys around every corner, so that if there is that chance there that there could be something more to them, perhaps that makes it even more sinister. It sets that little fear off in your head,
Yeah, and you write about it wonderfully in your book. You talk about like the connection, I think it was, between people, and like using eyes. Like we always look people in the eye when we communicate, and like you see a spark of consciousness in people's eyes. And when you look at a doll, it's a kind of a recreation of a human being, but yet, like Quint says in Jaws, a shark's got a doll's eyes, a black eye. Like you see a soulless eye staring back at you, and maybe that's where it gets unnerving for people.
Yeah, absolutely. There is definitely something about the eyes. Some of the work as well with some of the more collectible items can be really, really quite vivid and lifelike, and it's yeah. But some of them are not even designed to look creepy or to look like they're to unnerve us in a way. They might look like actually beautiful figurines, but there is something there in the face, in the eyes, the expression.
Fiona, when I was preparing for this conversation, I was actually going to go grab a couple dolls here and show them to you, like the Raggedy Ann doll and the Raggedy Andy doll. I don't know where they're here someplace. And then also when my daughter was real little or younger, she was taking piano lessons, and my poor mom, but being so generous with these toys. But my daughter got from my mom, this porcelain doll, this lovely girl with curly hair and a nice dress. And on the hem or the ruffle thing of the dress was a piano keyboard, like white, black keys, white, black keys, white, black keys. My mom got it to commemorate like her first piano recital. And my mom was really proud to give it to her. And my daughter was just like, oh, because it was like the porcelain doll face. And she was just as a little kid, before she even watched very many horror movies, she was creeped out.
Really? It just shows you, doesn't it? There's an instinct there before we even understand why we feel that way.
Absolutely.
Dolls do seem to do something to us, don't they?
Yes. And it's been that way for a long time. And you write about it masterfully through your book. You talk about, like I said, the the famous cases, the Robert the Doll, the Annabelle, not so famous cases. We talked about the mannequin in Mexico in the bridal store, and also Okiku from Japan. But in your book too, there's a chapter 4, Edna and Bonnie. You have you wrote about and also do little experiments, or you have experience with these dolls of your own.
Yeah, I did. And this all happened by accident, actually. Well, specifically, Edna happened by accident. As I was writing the book, I sort of mentioned on social media, I'm researching cases. Does anybody have significant experiences, basically, that I'd be happy to share? And then someone reached out to me, sent me a message. His name was Rob, and he runs his own podcast here in the UK. And he said to me that he'd basically had this doll. He called her Edna, and he said that he was told she was haunted. And as part of a special show on his podcast, he was going to spend 2 nights in a hotel, just him and this doll, just to see if anything would happen. He was skeptical himself about the whole thing. But basically, the end result is that after this recording of this podcast and the audio he recorded and this 2 nights in the hotel, he came away feeling like there was something attached to Edna. There was some kind of energy or haunting, to the point where after he finished recording, he tied Edna in a bag and locked her in his car boot because he didn't really want anything to do with her anymore. So he kindly reached out to me and said, yeah, I've had this experience. How about, as part of you writing the book, I'll send Edna to you. You can have her for a couple of weeks just to give you a bit of insight, see if you experience anything, and it can make an interesting chapter in the book. So I agreed to that because I thought it was a great idea. I was a bit nervous because I knew that Rob had experienced some things, and I wondered what I was getting myself into. But so basically, Rob sent me Edna, and I have to say, I did come away convinced, and I still am now, that there is some kind of energy attached to Edna. Pretty early on, I had the stereotypical sensation. It's quite often written about in hauntings and everything. The cold feeling, that kind of goosebump feeling you get, kind of chills, quite often when I was around her. And there was several occasions of seeing a fleeting figure going past in the house, which only happened after getting Edna. And the thing that was really compelling about this is that my husband, as I've explained, is a skeptic. He's not really into this whole idea that an object can be haunted. And he actually said when I was out of the house one day, he was sitting at the table doing something and he saw a shadow of a figure fleeting past, to the point where he got up out of the seat and thought somebody or something had got in. And all these sorts of things had only happened since having Edna. And then I started doing things like EVP experiments. And obviously, you don't have success all the time. But there was one time when I said, can you tell me your name, Edna? No, can you tell me your age, Edna? And I heard a distinctive childlike voice say 6 in response. So all this stuff I found really compelling. And in the end, I also bought a light sensor ball. It only lights up if it's touched or moved, basically. Mm-hmm. And I had a friend recommend that to me as something easy and fun to kind of see if you get interaction. So I bought this it's only a small little ball really, and I placed it on Edna. And I would say to her things like, if you're happy to, Edna, can you touch that ball and make it light up? And then there'd be an instant light up, like an instant response. And I've had that so many times, to the point where I've filmed it a few times and been able to add that to my TikTok to show people. So after a few weeks, I said to Rob, do you want her back now? I've had this interesting experience. He said, no, keep her. I don't want her back. He was quite happy to see Edna, at my end. I don't think I did anything to calm his nerves about her by telling him the experiences that I'd had, put it that way. So he said, no, please keep her. He knew that I'd enjoy kind of working around her and learning about her. So I still live with Edna now. And so I wrote about her in the book. And that was a really lovely thing that just happened purely by accident, from randomly hearing from Rob over the internet. And, it culminated in me having that experience. And obviously there's nothing like having an experience of your own to kind of help validate a belief in something. You can research as many cases as you want, but you still have to just kind of go by what you think about where the research takes you. But so there's something wonderful about having the experience yourself to kind of highlight the reality of something.
Interesting.
So,
I got to ask. So is that, you said podcast and host Rob, that's Rob Kirkup from How Haunted?
that's the one, Rob Kirkup. Yeah. So he, How Haunted podcast, and he's just wonderful, guys. And I didn't even know him before, before we kind of reached out over social media and before the whole Edna thing. But become good friends online now, and he's really sort of does a great job himself, in writing and his podcast and everything. So yeah, it's Rob, and he's become a good friend.
Oh, good. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Shout out to Rob Kirkup and the How Haunted podcast. I've stumbled across that show quite a few times, and I thought, oh yeah, that's a great, well-produced, well-researched, well-delivered. Yeah, he does a great job. So shout out Rob.
Absolutely.
I got to ask you, okay, so you're making this book.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going through here, and it's like I said, it's a great read, and there's illustrations in here. But Fiona, there's no photographs of the dolls. You got tremendous illustrations in here. I know that was a deliberate decision to put illustrations and not photographs. What was the thinking behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. So at one point, after I'd been offered a kind of contract with Llewellyn, we sort of discussed about how we wanted to put the book together and what we wanted to include. And we did seriously at one point consider adding photos of the dolls, just because it seemed like it would be a nice addition, something to kind of help kind of bring the cases to life, I guess. But the more that I researched and the more that the team at Llewellyn were looking into it, there was quite a few cases where there was almost people saying that they had bad luck just from seeing photos and pictures or having minimum contact with these dolls. So we thought, is it risky, or is it going to play on people's minds? Is it going to make some people uncomfortable? Or if people read it and have some bad luck, is that just going to culminate in something negative? Like Robert the doll, for instance, we have all heard the stories of people saying that they've taken photos of him and just experienced awful luck to the point where they've written to the museum to apologize. So we thought, do we want to go down that route of putting actual pictures of some of these dolls in the book? And so we thought, no, we'll take a step back from that. And we hired a wonderful artist who actually just drew some of the pictures, that their own sort of perspective, and did a really great job of illustrating the book, but without having to use the actual images. So we thought, we thought it was a wiser decision,
Better safe than sorry, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's crazy. You even mentioned in the book, like when people are looking at online auctions, and we'll get to that in a second too. But people looking at online auctions, like even looking at the photographs of the dolls that they might be bidding on or trying to buy it now through eBay, that they feel something coming through just the auction site. That's crazy too.
I know it is. It's become such a huge thing, hasn't it? Like, especially on eBay, actually, like the whole market is kind of flooded to a crazy extent. And I think in another way that almost doesn't help the skeptic's perspective, because obviously there is always going to be, and I'm not denying this, there will always be some people out there who are going to capitalize on these things and try and make a profit. But I think, amongst all that, there are genuine cases. So I think it's important to just make that distinction. It's easy to just sort of sweep the lot out with that. But there are some fascinating cases online. And as we spoke about earlier, Edna originally came from eBay, and Rob bought her in an almost kind of, oh, this is going to be ridiculous, I'm sure nothing will happen way. And yet both of us have come away feeling like there's something. So I think much like with anything in the paranormal, you just take things on a case-by-case basis and just see where your experience and research leads you. That's the only way you can do that fairly, really.
There's cases like you said, there's no definitive things that you could say about paranormal cases, and they're all different. I think each one is a unique individual experience. Like when you talk about psychometry, or actually holding or touching and being in close proximity of a doll, an object, or even being in a house, because a house is just a large object, and being able to feel or sense, pick up on like past emotions, psychic imprints on the property or the thing.
Hmm.
And then there's also the concept of like perhaps some kind of spirit, something that persists after a bodily death might be, I don't want to say possession, but somehow infused into an object. And so,
Yeah.
do you ever think like, do you guys have? I'm jumping ahead of myself here. Do you guys have thrift stores in England like we do here in America?
Well, we do have a lot of stores that are like, we have charity stores. So,
Yeah.
that people have donated. And I find a lot of interesting things in those. And then obviously you get like your vintage and antique stores as well.
You ever think
and
you walk into those places and they're just like hot spot? Like they should be like, there should be a paranormal reality show or something like that's just at a thrift or a charity store or something like that with all the things that are donated, especially, like after somebody passes away and the family comes in and cleans out the houses and they determine, oh, we're going to keep this, we're going to donate that, we're going to sell this. Some things that we think aren't valuable or don't have much value could have been sentimentally very valuable to the people that have passed away. And so those things that are donated to these charity shops or thrift shops, secondhand stores, that kind of a thing, might actually be the most haunted because they had such powerful connections to the living.
That's it. And I agree. These shops that have these kind of items are just probably more likely and just as likely to have objects that have energy or are haunted, and I think it's interesting what you said, if a person has owned an item for years and they love that item, they cherished it, it could be a family heirloom even, if there's some kind of attachment there was some kind of love for the object, especially with dolls actually, because an interesting aspect with dolls is not just like an object you like, people love dolls and they nurture them, and when they're younger, they kind of children put on personalities onto these dolls. There's a lot going on with that. And I think it's very much like a possibility that there's some kind of energy created there or some kind of link anyway between an owner and an object that they owned in their lifetime.
So you had this great interest in haunted dolls enough to, pitch an idea, get a book contract, write a great book. Now that it's over and you've got it out there, has it, going through this whole process of researching and writing and interviewing people for your book and getting it all committed onto paper and shipping it out there, has anything changed? Like from day one of starting this project to publication day, were your eyes opened in different ways? Did you think of things differently? Is there anything like new information? Like, oh my gosh, I was wrong. And this book and the research helped me change my mind. Is there any revelations that came out of writing this book on haunted dolls?
I think the most significant thing for me is that I went into the research of it purely as a kind of, I'm interested in this. I want to learn about this. I think it's possible. I do believe in spirits and hauntings because of my own experience, but I went into it more like a mental exercise of like, let's do a deep dive, let's learn. So if anything, the most significant thing I gained, I think, was purely ending up owning a couple of objects of my own that gave me that insight to kind of have that personal verification in a way that made it feel like definitely that there's some reality to this. So if anything, I went in from just being a learner and a researcher on the subject and wanting to kind of specialize in it to having that personal experience of my own. So I kind of went to the other end of being like interested to now an actual like believer that this is possible. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily like a common thing or that every item in our house or at a shop is going to be haunted and possessed or anything, but I'm just saying I think it's a phenomenon that happens and that it's a possibility, and that this happens to people. It's an occurrence that has affected people's lives and they've got no reason to kind of lie about that. People have been quite affected by it. Some people I've spoken to, didn't even want to actually be named or have anything from the situation. They just wanted to share something that's very personal to them. So it was just a whole very validating experience, really.
Yeah. And how do you combat that validation or, having all these great stories from people that you've interviewed and talked to? And then you get on eBay and it's just like, what are you doing? There's all these people selling haunted dolls and, and are some of them haunted? Perhaps. I'm not saying they're not, but at the same time, it's like, there's a lot of people out there just trying to make a buck off something they found at the garage sale.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. And I don't mean any disrespect to anyone, I'm not talking about any kind of particular sellers or anything, but obviously I'll always go into that with the mindset of you don't know at the beginning. You don't know if somebody's just trying to milk the situation, come up with a story. I'm sure that I'm sure we all accept that will have happened and does happen, but I just think there is a portion of people, and I think eBay is known for this, like haunted doll sellers and things, but I also know of people who see it very seriously, studies haunted objects and has spent a great deal of time, and they're very passionate about it, who sometimes do pass on their items on a site like eBay. So it's just having that thing of just an open mind, and like I said, taking it case by case and experience by experience. So if you're randomly going to go on eBay and just scroll down the screen and press purchase, the chances are you might come up empty and end up with just an average item. But I think amongst those things, there are some very genuine sellers and cases amongst it, so it just, you have to go by experience and common sense and where your gut takes you as well. So
let the buyer beware, indeed.
Yes.
And like I'm looking at the dolls that's on display behind you, and there's some it seems like the vintage ones are especially creepy. And I think it's just because we look at them with a modern eye. We look at the slick production techniques of manufacturing things now, how they're made out of, plastic and space age materials. But it's kind of like vintage dolls and also like old vintage Halloween costumes. If you look at the old vintage homemade Halloween costumes of like the early 1900s, there is nothing scarier at Halloween time than looking back at old photos of people in their old Halloween costumes. They are absolutely terrifying.
It is terrifying. It's absolutely freaky, isn't it? They knew how to make things scary back then. I don't know how or why, but there's a whole other level to Halloween costumes back then. And even like you said with dolls, that the eyes and the kind of the whole art process of creating the dolls, there's just something different about them, isn't there? So very creepy compared to like modern dolls. You see a production line of like Barbies and Bratz dolls and stuff, and it, but when you look at the older items, especially when you realize the amount of hours that went into the production of creating these items, but especially back in the day, like we're talking, 100 plus years ago, a lot of time and effort and energy and talent went into creating these little masterpieces of these dolls. And I'm sure much the same with Halloween costumes. You didn't have a store to go in then and buy a cheap bargain witch outfit. A lot of time and energy and individual talent went into creating these things.
Oh, for sure. And I just think like what just popped in my head when I was talking to you, when you were talking about the craftsmen making the dolls back then, I'm thinking about the Disney film, The Old Story of Pinocchio, and the old man, he carves out of wood this puppet for companionship, this boy. And it becomes, you can argue that Pinocchio is a haunted doll through that story. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. How did I miss that one? I don't know.
Well, for the sequel, you can write.
Yeah.
Now,
definitely.
Now, in the minutes that we have remaining, and this has been just such a treat and a delight talking to you. I heard on another interview that you are working on, and I'm not trying to get your secrets out there and everything, but you're working on a book, a follow-up kind of on haunted objects. So I'm just interested, like, where your research is kind of taking you now. And I know you're soliciting ideas or stories from your fans or from readers or listeners too. Like, what's the project that you're working on now about?
Yeah, so it's very early stages. It's not even half done yet. It's very early, and I've just got a few chapters down and a few pages of like notes and outlines. But the basic idea is that through the research of haunted dolls, quite naturally, I was coming across cases of haunted and cursed objects in general, and there was just so many of them that I thought there's just a whole wealth and array of material out there that, you know, kind of linked in as a subject, but just much more broader. So I really wanted to kind of take a deep dive into haunted objects throughout history, including maybe a few of the dolls that I didn't get to include in this book. But for the most part, you know, just a few cases of dolls, but it's much more broader this time. So even down to like stories and accounts of furniture, like, you know, and just all kinds of items really that just really surprised me, how many there were. So I just began to collect that information, and I've just slowly started putting it together. And that's really what I'd like to do, is release this second book and have it as a kind of like a follow-on to the Cursed Collection of Haunted Dolls, but just not just focus on dolls now. I'm taking it further and looking at the whole material out there.
Do you think it's going to kind of feature the same format, like things that are famous, not so famous, personal things, and then also maybe in pop culture? Is there going to be some pop culture in there too?
I'm not sure this time, actually. I haven't thought that far ahead. I don't have anything written in that way yet about the popular culture side of things, although there are cases of that. We all know, like, the story of the Dybbuk box, for example, and how that was, the movie was made of that, The Possessed, I think it's called. So there are examples there in film of like cursed and haunted objects that I could certainly write about, but I haven't got that far yet about whether I'm going to use that material this time or whether I'm just going to make it a complete sort of information and encyclopedia type thing on haunted and cursed objects. So, and it will have a lot of things about curses in it, because that seems just as prevalent actually as the idea of a spirit being attached. You know, the whole idea of items having been used in ritualistic purposes, or that were around some kind of dark events and bad, that kind of give off this bad luck and everything. That's quite a common thing, quite a lot of cases out there. So I wanted to use that as well. So.
Well, that's super interesting. Like the whole gamut or the whole world of things that can be haunted. I mean, like just even in pop culture, like there's the Stephen King book and movie Christine about the haunted car, and just anything else too. Like everything, people talk about mirrors. I myself am given a Halloween time lecture at a castle actually here in Omaha, Nebraska, believe it or not. That was a private residence that is rented out a lot now for weddings and everything. And upstairs where the bride and the bridal party get ready, there's a mirror there and people see reflections. Is the room haunted? Is the mirror haunted? Is that object haunted? It's super interesting. And here's
wow.
one, and here's something for you. There's a paranormal researcher of note named here in America, John Tenney. And he, one time he gave a lecture and he was talking about, and I caught it, he was talking about how an old, I think it was a mental hospital or a sane asylum, something of that nature, was torn down, and the wood was reclaimed, and a furniture maker, you know, bought up a bunch of the old wood and was making stuff out of it. And so people were experiencing, like, I don't know what it is about this chair, but whenever you sit in it, you get angry. And it's like that chair was made from wood from the insane asylum. And so that wood was like shipped out to custom furniture makers all over the United States that buy. Oh. So, I mean, like, you know, like those, I'm really interested in hearing and reading further books from you, especially as you dive into the world of haunted objects and everything that could be covered there, just like you covered in this great book here. It's a great book, and I'm super excited that you had the time to come over the ocean through wires of infinity and share this great book and your research with me and my listeners.
No, thank you. It's been wonderful talking to you and sort of delving into the book with you. It's been great. Please
join us again sometime. I'd love to have you on for your follow-up.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would love to come back on, you know, especially if, you know, eventually this second book comes out. I'm sure there'll be a lot more things that we can kind of dip into.
Well, everybody, it's been my pleasure to welcome to the show and have for this conversation on Halloween week, that's when we recorded this, a cursed collection of haunted dolls, Fiona Dodwell. Fiona, thank you so much for sharing your time and your energy with me and my listeners.
Oh, thank you, Brian, and have a happy Halloween.
You too. Well, there we go, everybody, friends and neighbors. Episode 309 with Fiona Dodwell, a cursed collection of haunted dolls. Hey, I get it. Dolls might not be your thing. Believe me, I really get it. But her book, Fantastic writing. I mean, you're not going to be picked by Morrissey to write his greatest hits liner notes if you don't know how to put a sentence or two together. So another winner from Llewellyn Press, and I'm really excited to follow Fiona and see what she's going to do in the future with her writing and her research. She's great. And so cool to like make this connection with somebody over there in England. Isn't that fun? All right. Episode 310. What do I got in store? Well, let me tell you. My friend Jason Offutt, Professor Jason Offutt, is back. We're going to be talking about his new book, Chasing North American Monsters, a guide to over 250 creatures from Greenland to Guatemala. That's a really good book, too. I'm reading all these great books. It's so exciting to have all these authors on and have them talk about not only the content of their book, but the writing process. Much respect for those that know how to string a phrase or two together, page after page, chapter after chapter, and lo and behold, there you go. There's a book. Jason's written over 20 of them. He's been on the program before. We talked about North American Monsters, or Chasing American Monsters was the name of that book. This one's Chasing North American Monsters. And if monsters aren't your thing, how about quick, witty, funny individuals? If you're into that, Jason's your man. After that, friends of the program, Richard Estep and Tobias Whalen, return for a discussion on Mothman, episode 311. 311's in the house, y'all. Paul Vecchiet, The Disclosure Paradox is coming up. And let me tell you about some of these episodes that I've got cooking for next year. Have you seen the movie Good Boy? Have you seen it yet? It's a haunted house story told through the perspective of a dog. It's on Shudder right now after a brief theatrical run. It was a hit in the horror movie convention circuit, and for good reason. Super imaginative, super clever. Can't wait for everybody to listen to my conversation with the filmmaker, Ben Leonberg. Good boy. Next, a whack job. Rachel McCarthy James. I don't mean to say that she's a whack job, but she wrote a book called Whack Job. Episode 314, Whack Job, A History of Axe Murder. Talking about a subject everybody can find interesting. Are we living in a simulation? Rizwan Burke, MIT professor, will be here in 2026 talking about the simulation hypothesis. One of the questions I'm going to ask him is like, if this is all a simulation, then why don't I simulate like hundreds of millions of listeners? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm starting to build up a nice little audience here that you're a part of, and I thank you. But if I was going to simulate something else, if I had the ability to simulate something, I think I would. So what's going on? We just had our first snowfall of the year, like yesterday, the day after Thanksgiving, 2 days after Thanksgiving. Insanity. I was mowing the lawn on Friday. 3 or 4 inches of snow on the ground Saturday. What the hell? Here in the Necronomicast headquarters, Omaha, Nebraska. So, from right here from the headquarters out to all of you in podcast land, I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. December is here. I hope you have a great holiday season, however you choose to celebrate or observe how other people celebrate. I hope it's great. Thank you to Jessica for sponsoring this episode of Necronomicast. Jessica, right back at you. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode with Fiona. My friend Andrew Vogt playing the saxophone there. You can find him on drewsblues.com. Give the gift of music this year. Support small businesses, creative people, musicians, artists. Go see a play. Go see a local production of Christmas Carol, why don't ya? Do something. Thanks for listening. Have a good night. Get some sleep. Let's go.